All right, hi, welcome back. So today we are going to be working on experiential. This will be chapter, let's see, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will be chapter 5. We are going through the things. So it's the experiential. Their belief was people don't heal by understanding life, they heal by experiencing it. So that experience. So the therapists and founding people were Virginia Satir. People like to think of her as like a loving grandmother, very emotional focused. And then Carl Whitaker, he's one of my favorites, but he's like considered like the crazy uncle. But both wanted families to become emotionally alive again. What they believed caused the problem was that they believed that the problem develops when people hide feelings, pretend, avoid vulnerability, stop growing emotionally, or become emotionally disconnected. So lots of emotion talk now. We're doing the individual psychotherapy. It was all about the individual. Then we moved into the awakening of the whole idea of general systems thinking, that there is a connection. We've already gone through Bowen in family systems where he saw the generational connection. We did MRI where he was looking for the system. Remember, he's the traffic person. And now we are going to experiential, which is another form. Again, everybody is filling in the blocks, asking the questions that previous therapists had not yet done. And it is going to continue to do this as we go through each chapter through the historical context of the development of these theories. So, back to experiential. Therapy was created because early family therapists were becoming too intellectual. Analyzing, planning, reorganizing, and Satira asked, but what about the people? Love, grief, fear, vulnerability, hope. She wanted therapies to help experience those feelings instead of simply discussing them. She was done just talking. She's like, feelings, this is all about feelings. Virginia Satir, she's often called the mother of family therapy. She grew up watching families hide feelings, parents avoid difficult conversations, and children learn to pretend. Nobody talked honestly. She believed people don't become emotionally unhealthy because they have feelings. They become unhealthy because they hide them. She believed every person wants love, belonging, connection, acceptance, and self-worth. Everybody wants to belong. Everybody wants to feel loved. And when these needs are not met, that's when people develop unhealthy coping skills. The other one, of course, was Carl Whitaker, which has always been one of my favorites. And Whitaker was almost the complete opposite of her. He believed families became trapped in rigid routines. Sometimes the therapist would intentionally create chaos. So that's why I like him. He was famous for humor, weird comments, surprises, spontaneity. So just kind of something to just shake the system. People often left sessions with Whitaker thinking, what just happened? Which is exactly what Whitaker wanted. He believed emotional growth happens when people stop acting and start being real. So the goals for experiential therapy are to increase authenticity, again, being real, increase self-esteem, again, that has to do with your emotions, increase emotional expression, emotions, increase intimacy, emotions, increase personal growth, that's kind of that self-esteem, increase congruent communication, so making sure that everything lines up. So first, in historical context, Bowen focused on generations, MRI was focused on communication patterns, strategic, remember, focused on changing that behavior, structural, focused on the organization. Satir looked around and said, none of that matters if people never actually feel. She believed families were emotionally starving and people talked, but they weren't connecting. The core belief was that people naturally move towards health when they feel safe enough to become authentic. Why? Because people aren't broken. They're disconnected from themselves, each other, or their emotions. Healing happens through genuine emotional experiences. Analogy, imagine a family eating dinner. Everyone is sitting together, nobody's yelling, nobody's fighting. Everything looks perfect, but nobody's actually knows what anyone is feeling. Experiential says that's not connection. Therapist role, the therapist is genuine, warm, authentic, emotionally present, not cold, not distant. The therapist models healthy emotional connection. So some strengths for experiential were that it's excellent for low self-esteem. Again, we are dealing with emotions, so keep that in mind when you think of experiential. It helps with disconnected couples, helps families with emotional distance. It helps identity to development. It helps personal growth, and it helps with attachment. Some of its weaknesses are that it's less structured. It's harder to research. Again, it's all about experience and emotions, which was always a problem in the past. If you watch my previous videos, it's like, how do you quantify emotion? Another weakness was that it can overwhelm clients, can become uncomfortable with their emotional expression, because again, these people have been suppressing it. So it's like, oh, it's so much at once. Sometimes it's too much. And of course, it also depends heavily on the therapist skill, especially if you're going to go more Whitaker route. Like, you have to have that therapeutic alliance and that therapeutic rapport with your client, because if not, you can piss some client off. You can rub them the wrong way. You can be emotionally triggering to them. So you got to, like, experiential, you got to be seasoned. You got to have that rapport. You have to be deliberate and attentive with what you are doing when you are doing it, because we are dealing with more of emotions. So it's very triggering. Be very, very mindful of that. Some clues. So think experiential in the exam. If you see anything about self-esteem, anything about authenticity or being your authentic true self, anything about congruence, again, that's all about being your true self. Anything about emotional expression, expressing that emotion, definitely Virginia Satir, experiential. Think about it if they're talking about communication stances, growth, therapist's use of self, because therapists will use some memorizing material. So if you see family sculpting, think experiential. If you see communication stances, think Satir. If you see congruence, kind of the same thing, Satir. Chaos or humor, that's always Whitaker. That's still experiential, again, because we're going into the emotions. We're triggering those emotions. We're talking about the things that people don't want to talk about. They're experiencing what they have been suppressing. Of course, self-esteem, emotion, Satir, experiential. So Satir's 5 communication stances, and these are quite often on the test. So being the placater, I'll keep everyone happy. They need everyone else's approval. Their own needs disappear. Example, I'm sorry, even when nothing was their fault. Or the one, it's your fault. Protects himself by attacking others. They feel powerful. They actually feel insecure internally, though. The computer, or super reasonable. They act like a robot. They use logic, no emotion. Everything becomes facts. The distractor changes the subject, makes jokes, avoids emotional conversation. Congruent, so they have healthy communication, feelings, thoughts, behavior, all match. And if you're congruent, that's Satir's goal. Good. Everything is your feelings, your thoughts, your beliefs, all that. It's all positive, good feelings, good stuff. Self-esteem. This is Virginia Satir's favorite topic. Healthy families create I am vulnerable, and unhealthy families create I am only valuable if. Yeah. So some examples. A couple comes to therapy and they say, we never fight. Satir asks, when was the last time either of you cried in front of each other? Silence. 20 years. She smiles gently and says, that's why you're here. The problem wasn't conflict. The problem was the absence of emotional intimacy. Memory joke. Satir, now tell your daughters how much you love them. Whitaker would be, while standing up on one foot and pretending you're a chicken. Whitaker, excellent. Now we're finally becoming authentic. So he would just push. He would push you out of your norm, push you out of your element, make you feel uncomfortable again. Because then you're being your most authentic self. You're not reciting and practicing and trying to focus on, oh, I got to pretend that we're a happy couple. I have to pretend that we're not a dysfunctional family. No, he would push you where you can no longer pretend. And that was his point. Now we're not pretending. Now we're being our real self. Yeah, now you're tripping and falling. Now you're acting a goof. Yeah, that's your authentic self. You're not able to rehearse this. You're not able to practice. I'm throwing you off. That's your authentic self. That's when the emotions are real. And that is why it aligns so well with satir, and that's why it's part of experiential. Experiential also said, the greatest change doesn't happen when people understand themselves better. It happens when they experience themselves differently. So the interventions that I talked about earlier, I'm going to explain in a little bit. So we have family sculpting, one of the most famous interventions and one of my favorites to do with families. The therapist physically arranges family members to represent emotional relationships. Example, the mom stands over everyone, the dad's in a corner, the children are turned away, and nobody is saying anything. The family suddenly sees their emotional system. They're not talking. They're in different corners. They're turned away from each other. Yeah, love doing that intervention. Another one was parts party. Each family member acts out different parts of themselves. Example, the perfectionist, the inner child, the angry part, the fearful part. This helps integrate conflicting emotions. Okay, so the next one is touch. Satir occasionally use an appropriate supportive touch to communicate warmth and safety. So again, maybe like a hand on hand, kind of like it's okay, like you're not alone. Exam note, this reflects her historical style. Modern therapists use touch for more caution and within ethical and cultural boundaries. And then humor, of course, that was mostly what occurred. That was not satir, but humor breaks rigid emotional patterns like we talked about. So symbolic experiences would be role plays, metaphors, creative exercises, empty chair, movement. Passing the baton. Experiential reminded family therapy that systems aren't just patterns, they're people with emotions. So that's all I got for that section right now. I'm sure I'm going to fill it up with more. Again, I'm just slightly putting my notes together. But that kind of at least gives you hopefully a rough idea of experiential. Again, it was with Virginia Satir, who is the mama, I'm all about emotions. Carl Whitaker, who's just your crazy ass uncle, who is just asking those really hard ass questions that put people uncomfortable and go, oh, like I could totally see Whitaker going, if there's like a mom and a son dyad that, is obviously not appropriate, there's enmeshment going on. I could totally see Whitaker's being like, and so how long have you been married to your son? Something like that, Of course, I could see a couple other therapists saying that as well, but I'm just saying, like, he asked those questions that made the system uncomfortable, where it had a wiggle. It wiggled. Okay? There was some movement. There was some awareness. There was like, we're not going to ignore the elephant in the room. He made you see it. And satir in the same fashion, but with emotions. So there's experiential. Keep on trucking along. If you are following along with my timeline, we have now just kind of completed that middle section where we were moving from, I'm putting X's so I know which ones I've done. Where we started with individual psychotherapy before everything, when the problem was the person. Then we had the realization that, there's systems. So we got general systems theory, that things are a system. It's a circular. People react. Things are reacting. Things, that's kind of where I started opening. Then that created the dawn of family therapy, which was born in the 1950s. We've already gone through Bowen. Of course, Bowen was looking for the generational connection. Again, everybody's feeling a void. We're all trying to figure out why is the problem, and looking at different ways. MRI, he was looking for the system. Again, what is causing the traffic problem? We just did experiential, which is all bringing awareness to the emotion that people might be suppressing or not talking about. Next, I'm going to go back under MRI, which maybe I should have done it again. This is my rough draft. I'm sure eventually I will redo all these videos in a better format. But we're going to go back under MRI, and what came out of MRI, what we'll talk about in this next chapter, is strategic therapy. Because Jay Haley was in the MRI Institute and was working with them. But Jay Haley, which we'll do in the next section for strategic, thought, what is the strategy that we're going to do to stop the traffic jam that MRI found? So it was kind of the next development, the evolution, and even within that one, which I will cover in that exact same chapter when I do strategic, all these S words, they get me. Strategic is how strategic in time evolves within itself into Haley Madonis. So Madonis ends up joining Haley and kind of, again, evolving and filling in another part. Haley adds, okay, so if MRI solved the traffic jam, J. Haley was strategic, saw how to fix the traffic jam. Let's have a strategy towards fixing this problem. And we'll learn what Madonis adds to that missing piece in the next chapter. All right. If you found this at any point helpful, I hope something, even if it's one chunk of news or information, sticks to your head, great. Share, follow, whatever. Again, I'm just trying to help people understand these theories in a more structured format that helps my ADHD, OCD brain. I am a very visual learner. I have to have things just line up, and I have to see how things kind of grow, and this helps me. Again, it has been years since I've taken Psychology 101. It has been even longer since I've been in grad school, so I'm struggling in that for that reason and in that way. And this is my way of trying to help myself reopen those old things that I cannot, for some reason, in another format learn, because I have been trying. And connect the dots where it's just comfortable, where it just flows. So I hope this video aids in your understanding and comprehension of experiential. I will now be going under MRI, and the next video will be on strategic therapy with J. Haley. Again, he came from MRI, and we will see what he sees is a solution towards those traffic jams that MRI found. Okay, good luck in studying. You got this. You're amazing. Bye.